Hi guys, Mrs. Gutierrez here. I often read to you guys in class, and so I wanted to take some time and video myself doing that because I didn't want us to miss out on that time. So bear with me. This is my first distance learning video as your 8th grade ELA teacher. I'll probably trip over my words a couple times, and you can giggle at me. I won't even know because you're on the other side of the screen. All right. We are reading The Outsiders. This book is awesome. I can remember reading it when I was in 8th grade in Montana. So last week you had finished chapter 4 and you took a quiz for me, and then I asked you to please read chapter 5. And so here we are, chapter 6. So far, most recently, we had a pretty exciting part of the book where Johnny and Ponyboy decide to kind of go for a walk, and they end up getting jumped by some Socs, which is pretty typical, as you've learned. And so Ponyboy gets shoved into the fountain. His head gets shoved into the fountain, and they almost drown him. And so Johnny comes to his rescue and stabs Bob, the Soc, and actually kills him, which is shocking, I know. And so at this point now they are on the lam or on the run, and they are staying in a church and living off bologna sandwiches, reading Gone with the Wind. They've chopped their hair off to disguise themselves. They've got a gun, a little bit of money, and they're running low on supplies. And now Dally actually shows up finally a few days later and takes them out to eat at the Dairy Queen. And that's where we are in chapter 6. So if you want to pause the video and go ahead and grab your book, and you can open up to page 85. That's where we are. I would love for you to follow along while I read, because I just think that that's maximizing your learning as you read, to hear me reading and follow along yourself. So here we go. All right, page 85, chapter 6. Johnny gagged, and I almost dropped my hot fudge sundae. Cherry? We both said at the same time. The Soc? Yeah, Dally said. She came over to the vacant lot the night Two-Bit was jumped. Shepard and some of his outfit and us were hanging around there when she drives up in her little old Stingray. That's a really cool old car. That took a lot of nerve. Some of us was for jumping her then and there. Her being the dead kid's girl and all. But Two-Bit stopped us. Man, next time I want a broad, I'll pick up my own kind. Yeah, Johnny said slowly. And I wondered if, like me, he was remembering another voice, also tough, and just deepened into manhood, saying, next time you want a broad, pick up your own kind. Remember, that's what Bob said when they were at the fountain, okay? It gave me the creeps. Dally was going on. She said she felt that the whole mess was her fault, which it is, and that she'd keep up with what was coming off with the Socs in the rumble, and would testify that the Socs were drunk and looking for a fight, and that you fought back in self-defense. He gave a grim laugh. That little gal sure does hate me. I offered to take her over to the Dingo for a Coke, and she said no thank you, and told me where I could go in very polite terms. Probably not, right? She was afraid of loving you, I thought. So Cherry Valance, the cheerleader, Bob's girl, the Soc, was trying to help us. No, it wasn't Cherry the Soc who was helping us. It was Cherry the dreamer, who watched sunsets and couldn't stand fights. And you know who else loves sunsets and can't stand fights, right? Our narrator, Ponyboy. They really have a lot in common, which is very ironic, right? It was hard to believe a Soc would help us, even a Soc that dug sunsets. Dally didn't notice. He'd forgotten about it already. Man, this place is out of it. What do they do for kicks around here? Play checkers? Dally surveyed the scene without interest. I ain't never been in the country before. Have you two? Johnny shook his head, but I said, Dad used to take us all hunting. I've been in the country before. How'd you know about the church? I got a cousin that lives around here somewheres. Tip me back. I reached maximum recording capacity. Tipped me off that it would make a tough hideout in case of something. Hey, Ponyboy, I heard you was the best shot in the family. Yeah, I said. Derry always got the most ducks, though. Him and Dad. Soda and I goofed around too much. Scared most of our game away. What he means by game, if you're not from a family of huntsmen like I am, is the animals that you hunt is game, right? I couldn't tell Dally that I hated to shoot things. He'd think I was soft. That was a good idea. I mean, cutting your hair and bleaching it. They printed your descriptions in the paper, but you sure wouldn't fit them now. Johnny had been quietly finishing his 5th barbecue sandwich, but now he announced, "We're going back and turn ourselves in." It was Dally's turn to gag. Then he swore a while. Then he turned to Johnny and demanded, "What?" I said, "We're going back and turn ourselves in," Johnny repeated in a quiet voice. I was surprised, but not shocked. I had thought about turning ourselves in lots of times, but apparently the whole idea was a jolt to Dallas. You guys know who Dallas is. He's tough, like Ponyboy said, and he is very hardened, and stuff like this shocks him. The thought of turning yourself in after you've done something awful, turning yourself into the cops, unthinkable, right? But Ponyboy and Johnny are a lot different than Dallas. They're a lot more innocent. They're a lot more young. They haven't been through some of these really hard life experiences like Dallas has. And of course, I've lost my place. I got a good chance of being let off easy, Johnny said desperately. And I didn't know if it was Dally he was trying to convince or himself. I ain't got no record with the fuzz, and it was self-defense. Ponyboy and Sherry can testify to that. And I don't aim to stay in that church all my life. That was quite a speech for Johnny. His big black eyes grew bigger than ever at the thought of going to the police station, for Johnny had a deathly fear of cops. But he went on, "We won't tell that you helped us, Dally, and we'll give you back the gun and what's left of the money and say we hitchhiked back, so you won't get in any trouble, okay?" Dally was chewing the corner of his ID card, which gave his age as 21, so he could buy liquor. "You sure you want to go back? Us greasers get it worse than anyone else." Guys, what does Dallas mean by that? Us greasers get it worse than anybody else. What he's saying here is that they've got a stereotype over their head. You know, they've got a reputation. And the minute they go before a court of law, they're not going to get equal treatment like a Soch would. Even though we know now that the social group, the social gang, are just as bad or worse, they're bullies, right, than the greasers. The greasers look troublesome, right? They dress with their greasy long hair and their tough, hard clothes, right? Their black jackets. I think I showed you guys some pictures in class of like James Dean and John Travolta in Grease, and just that overall look. And when a judge or a police officer sees a greaser, they're instantly gonna, not believe what they say. They're not gonna give them any credit or any chance to try to prove that what they did, didn't come from somewhere bad. All right, back to the book. So we're on page 87 and at the bottom paragraph, if you're following along. Johnny nodded. "I'm sure it ain't fair for Ponyboy to have to stay up in that church with Daria and Soda, worrying about him all the time. I don't guess," he swallowed and tried not to look eager. "I don't guess my parents are worried about me or anything." "The boys are worried," Dally said in a matter-of-fact voice. "Two-Bit was going to Texas to hunt for you." "My parents?" Johnny repeated doggedly. "Did they ask about me?" "No," snapped Dally, "they didn't. Blast it, Johnny. What do they matter? Shoot, my old man don't give a hang whether I'm in jail or dead, in a car wreck, or drunk in the gutter. They don't bother me none." Johnny didn't say anything, but he stared at the dashboard with such hurt bewilderment that I could have bawled, which means to cry really hard. And we know, Johnny knows, that his parents just don't care about him at all. And maybe Dallas's parents don't care, but it's much different, right? Johnny's more sensitive, like Ponyboy is, so he wants to know if his parents are worried about him. It's hurtful for him that they don't care. Dally cussed under his breath and nearly tore out the transmission of the T-Bird as we roared out of the Dairy Queen. I felt sorry for Dally. He meant it when he said he didn't care about his parents, but he and the rest of the gang knew Johnny cared and did everything they could to make it up to him. I don't know what it was about Johnny. Maybe that lost puppy look and those big scared eyes. I don't know what it was about Johnny. Maybe that lost puppy look and those big scared eyes were what made everyone his big brother. But they couldn't, no matter how hard they tried, take the place of his parents. I thought about it for a minute. Derry and Soda Pop were my brothers, and I loved both of them. Even if Derry did scare me. But not even Soda could take Mom and Dad's place. And they were my real brothers, not just sort of adopted ones. No wonder Johnny was hurt because his parents didn't want him. Dally could take it. Dally was of the breed that could take anything because he was hard and tough. And when he wasn't, he could turn hard and tough. Johnny was a good fighter and could play it cool, but he was sensitive, and that isn't a good way to be when you're a greaser. Blast it, Johnny, Dally growled as we flung along the red road. Why didn't you think of turning yourself in 5 days ago? It would have saved a lot of trouble. I was scared, Johnny said with conviction. I still am. He ran his finger down one of his short black sideburns. I guess we ruined our hair for nothing, Pony Boy. I guess so. I was glad we were going back. I was sick of that church. I didn't care if I was bald. Dally was scowling. You guys know the word scowling. That's on our vocabulary list. It means to make kind of a frustrated, mean face. Scowling. And from long and painful experience, I knew better than to talk to him when his eyes were blazing like that. I'd likely not get clobbered over the head. That had happened before, just as it had happened to all the gang at one time or another. We rarely fought among ourselves. Derry was the unofficial leader, since he kept his head best. Soda and Steve had been best friends since grade school and never fought, and Two-Bit was just too lazy to argue with anyone. Johnny kept his mouth shut too much to get into arguments, and nobody ever fought with Johnny. I kept my mouth shut too, but Dally was a different matter. If something beefed him or made him mad, he didn't keep quiet about it. And if you rubbed him the wrong way, look out. Do you guys know what it means to rub somebody the wrong way? It means you've made them angry, kind of made a bad impression on them. Maybe you said something that made them upset and kind of look at you in a negative way. Not even Derry wanted to tangle with him. He was dangerous. Johnny just sat there and stared at his feet. He hated for any one of us to be mad at him. He looked awful sad. Dally glanced at him out of the corner of his eye. I looked out the window. Johnny, Dally said in a pleading high voice, using a tone I had never heard from him before. Johnny, I ain't mad at you. I just don't want you to get hurt. You don't know what a few months in jail can do to you. Oh, blast it, Johnny. He pushed his white blonde hair back out of his eyes. You get hardened in jail. I don't want that to happen to you like it happened to me. I kept staring out the window at the rapidly passing scenery, but I felt my eyes getting round. Dally never talked like that. Never. Dally didn't give a Yankee dime about anyone but himself, and he was cold and hard and mean. He never talked about his past or being in jail that way. If he talked about it at all, it was to brag. And I suddenly thought of Dally in jail at the age of 10, Dally, growing up in the streets. Would you rather have me living in hideouts for the rest of my life, always on the run? Johnny asked seriously. If Dally had said yes, Johnny would have gone back to the church without hesitation. He figured Dally knew more than he did, and Dally's word was law. But he never heard Dally's answer, for when we had reached the top of Jay Mountain, and Dally suddenly slammed on the brakes and stared. What happens here? I'm going to leave it up to you to read. This is a very big part of the story. And it's also going to lead you into your assignment for today. So you've taken the quiz, and now hopefully you have read or followed along with me as I've read part of chapter 6 to you. You're going to finish the chapter, and then you're going to jump on Google Classroom, and you're going to answer my discussion prompt. Have you ever heard of an unlikely hero? This is somebody who you wouldn't expect to save the day. Okay, so think about, have you guys just seen Spider-Man Homecoming? Little, unassuming Peter Parker, who's very shy and not very strong, winds up being Superman, super tough, and becomes an Avenger. Well, you're about to discover a couple of unlikely heroes in chapter 6, And that's what your discussion prompt is today. If you have any questions, please tune in, accept my invite in Google Hangouts, and you can tune in with me to ask me some questions live. Of course, you can always email me.